Jesus said, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead." The story, this gospel story, this parable that Jesus tells is a story about natural consequences. Natural consequences. Those of us who are or who have raised children will know all about that. Allowing our children to experience the natural consequences of their choices. This is not a story about a punishing God or a vengeful God. This is a story about all of us experiencing the choices that we make and also experiencing the effects of choices that other people make and affect our own lives. The story of the rich man and Lazarus, and of course it's highly exaggerated, but I think it comes from a place in Jesus' heart of compassion and frustration. Compassion because Jesus loved everybody, rich and poor alike. He didn't come into the world to judge. He came into the world to show the face of God, to show people what love really looks like. And so he moved about in his world with a heart of compassion, but I think also deep frustration. He must have looked about and seen the land that God had given to their ancestors, a land flowing with milk and honey, where the wheat fields were ripe and full, the olive groves were decked with fruit, and yet what he saw was poverty and hunger and want. Small farmers forced into taking out ruinous loans and often turfed off their land, and then their farms sold to rich owners, rich conglomerations. He saw working people, men and women, like his stepfather Joseph and his brothers, who, rather than having a secure job, and these were skilled people, had to go and stand outside the gates of the wealthy and wait and beg for a job every day. And then the cities, of course, were filled with the poor and the destitute, men and women and children who were hungry every day, who had nowhere to lay their head. And all of this in a land of abundance. How could this be? There was more than enough for everybody, for everybody. And so I think Jesus' heart of compassion was full, but I think he was frustrated, and so sometimes he would tell stories, hopefully to get people's attention. Hopefully to get people's attention. This is a story about natural consequences. It's really a story also about sharing. About sharing. Why is it so difficult for us to share? Greed and fear. Greed and fear. And it's kind of curious, isn't it? Because when we're at preschool and kindergarten and first and second grades, there is a great deal of emphasis on sharing. Any of you who have experienced kindergarten recently or preschool or first grade will know that one of the big lessons that are given to children is it's important to share. It is important to share. You have to share the toys that are there. You have to share because that's how we live together as human beings. We can only live together in peace and harmony when we learn to share what we have and what the world has. But something happens between our earliest years and by the time we grow up. It sort of comes out in conversations over, sales tax. Oh my gosh, that's the thin end of the wedge here in Oregon. Don't talk about sales tax. I don't know what wedge people are talking about. it is hard for us as we get older to share because we become fearful. We become fearful that if I share what I have, then I won't have enough. That's what it really comes down to, which I think is kind of a lack of trust, really. A lack of trust in God's goodness and God's provision and God's abundance. If I do share, I won't have enough because actually I don't think God will take care of my needs. That's it in a nutshell. And because of that, we create these systems of selfishness and greed where some people have way more than they need and lots of other people have far less than they need and are anxious every week, every month about making ends meet. Having enough to pay the bills and put food on the table in a land of abundance, in a land of milk and honey, in a land where we have more than enough. The story seems kind of harsh, and it's meant to be so because it's meant to be sort of a bucket of cold water over our heads. I mean, it's a bit egregious. Lazarus covered in sores, and even the dogs would lick his sores. I mean, let's lay it on with a trowel, Jesus. And then the rich man, after he dies, is in Hades in torment. Well, the whole point is that the rich man was part of and sustained and was complicit in a system where there were people like Lazarus. In a perfect world, nobody would be like Lazarus. But because of the system that had been created and the system that the rich man was complicit in, he had more than he needed, and so that meant that Lazarus had less than he needed. Because resources are not infinite. There's only so much pie. And if I have 99% of the pie for myself, what does that mean? How much is left? 1%. If I have 99% of the pie. Yeah? Yep. Resources are not infinite. The rich man during his life was able to avoid the natural consequences of his choices. He was able to live in luxury and comfort, and he could avoid the consequences of his choices, because the consequence of his choice was that Lazarus experienced a living hell during his lifetime as a natural consequence of the rich person's greed and fear. When they both died, the tables were reversed, and Lazarus was comforted while the rich man then had to finally face the consequences, the natural consequences of his choices. And the irony of the story is wonderful. I love it. Because the reason why the rich man is in torment is not because God is horrible and wants to punish the rich man, because God loves the rich man as much as he loves Lazarus. But the reason why the rich man is in torment is because even though he is in Hades, he's still acting with this sense of entitlement. Oh, Father Abraham, send Lazarus. Send the boy to dip his finger in some water and cool my tongue because I am in torment. It's still all about him. It's still all about his entitlement. And so, of course, he is in torment. He could have easily said, I am so glad, Father Abraham, that Lazarus is finally receiving the comfort that he deserved as a child of God. But no, it's all about him still. And even when he calls up a shred of compassion for his brothers, who by implication are as self-centered and narcissistic as he was and still is, he again says, well, send Lazarus then to them. If you can't help me, at least you can help some of my family. What? Lazarus is still being treated like a servant. Lazarus, the rich man still sees Lazarus not as his equal, but as someone below him. That is why he is in torment, not because of God. God doesn't create hell. We do a very good job all on ourselves. It's so easy to create a living hell for others and a living hell inside our own minds. Let me finish with this. I was reading a really interesting article in The Advocate. It's a free newspaper, local newspaper that comes out every 2 weeks. And a lot of it has to do with social justice. This last edition was really focused on homelessness or home insecurity. And some really interesting statistics. To be able to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Oregon, guess how much the minimum wage would have to be? What do you think? $18? Any different? Yeah, $22.50. You're absolutely right. For the average person to rent, not even to own, but to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in the state of Oregon, on average, the minimum wage needs to be $22.50. Baby boomers. Now, this is not to point the finger at people 55 and older, but it just so happened to be the statistic. But in Oregon, 1 out of 4 people 55 and older own a second home. 1 in 4. And most of those homes are for their pleasure and enjoyment. They are second homes, they're holiday homes. 1 in 10 Oregonians live without a home or in what they call home insecurity. They may not be able to stay in their homes. There was one couple who the reporter interviewed who, they live in Corvallis. They own 4 homes here in the Willamette Valley. And they don't rent them out. They have them because they like to have more than one home, depending on the mood. Is that insane or what? And it kind of creates this living hell for all of us. Right? Jesus said, if they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they listen to someone, even if they rise from the dead. Well, Jesus rose from the dead. Are we listening? Amen.